Hey, it's Dave Bauer.
And this is Brian Mertens, and you're listening to Rewilding Conversations.
Yeah, I'm excited to be getting into this topic today, talking about how to plan a day of nature activities. So how are you doing, Dave?
Hey, I'm doing great. We got a little bit of a drop in temperature, but it's really more seasonal and beautiful sunny day. And it's feeling like the climate is readjusting to something a little bit more normal. So it's really good to have you on the phone.
Yeah, cool. We've definitely we keep going back and forth. We have like a few cold days and cold nights, and then it warms up and it gets just actually surprisingly warm these last few days, and now it's starting to cool off again. So it's always fun at this time of year when you get such a variation in the weather, and it's always fun to see how the animals and the birds respond to all the changes in the same way that people do.
Yeah.
And it's I'm as I mentioned before, just excited to be recording another rewilding conversation here with you. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, so it looks like we're going to introduce our audience to planning a nature activity, a day of nature activities. So this should be a rich effort on our part, and certainly one where we've got a lot of wise folks out there in the audience. We're really, Brian and I are both very excited about hearing from you. So jot down some notes if you're listening, and give us some feedback in terms of what you know or what your thoughts are in terms of planning a vibrant and exciting nature activity yourselves. So where do you want to start, Brian?
Yeah, well, I think, we could just sort of bounce some ideas around, the topic just on a general level. I think for me, the reason that I was interested in talking about this one is I think there's a lot of people who are interested and engaging in the process of either starting a nature school or starting a forest kindergarten, or doing all kinds of different activities where you're sort of taking a leadership role and planning experiences that you're taking people through outside, whether it's kids or adults, one of the challenges that comes up is like in the planning process. How do you actually put together the curriculum and make the day just have the best possible impact? And I think that there's lots of things that we could discuss around this. It's one of the things that I've been working on a lot in my one-on-one mentoring calls, and so it just seems to keep coming up in my life. And I think it'll be fun to just dive in and talk about some different ways of doing this.
Like it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? What are you excited to talk about on this one?
Well, I think when I asked myself, what would I want to know earlier, early as possible, right? And so let me reply to my own question. What would I want to know early before I get that activity planned at all? So among the things I'd want to know would be the ages of the participants, and will it be mixed? Will it be, for example, if it was younger children, would teachers be coming? Would those parents and teachers be participative, or would they expect me or the organizer to be managing the activity and not engage them? Because I've had both experiences. I've had activities where parents kind of come willing to participate, and then I've had activities where there's kind of a blend. Some participate, some kind of hang out and step off on the side on their phones and stuff. So that presents its own little challenges, but the level of participation of those that would be coming, I'd like to know that. I'd also like to know how much time will I have with them? How much time are they seeking? And in terms of that time, what amount of it would be an outdoor experience and what amount of it might be indoor? Because there again, I've had a fusion of both. I like often to maximize the outdoor time, and then sometimes there's an opportunity for a little bit of indoor time, depending on the facility and the place, where some interesting things can happen indoors. So for example, a reading. So a reading could maybe easily more happen in an indoor setting. So the indoor-outdoor time. The other piece is I like to gather contact information as much as is appropriate. So, the names of the participants. If it's kids, I like to have a list of names in my pocket so I can kind of call them up and with their ages on it. That's kind of nice to know, because I may be directing some things towards younger children versus middle-aged children. I would know that based on the list I have. Also, it's really nice to know like email addresses and parent names or newsletters and stuff like that. So gathering that skillfully and eloquently during the activity or prior to the activity just makes for the connectedness, the future connectedness of me with them. So, and then the last thing I have in mind is, would there be any opportunity for like a pre-event assessment? In other words, what are they expecting? Is there someone who's bringing me on site to lead a group, and what's that person's expectations? Can I do a site visit or not? If I haven't been to the site, I find if it's not too far away, doing a site visit is really helpful. Because there are sometimes some really cool things that, gosh, if I had kind of known this, I would have been able to do something cool. There's also some times where the physical setting is a little limited. So I'd like to know that so that I don't come with this big expectation of doing this really cool activity when, in fact, it may be tough. Example of that might be noise. Sometimes I'm doing outdoor activities in settings where there's a reasonably large roadway, not too far away. And if there's semis and stuff like that driving by, it can be a little acoustically difficult. Compared to someone like you, Brian, who probably doesn't even think about that. You probably think your work is often much more deeper into a woodland or nature area where the ambient noise doesn't enter into your concerns. But some of us, for example, myself, I have noticed I needed to move from A to B because I realized that site A was too noisy and site B was more enjoyable. So that's my early list of kind of audience characteristics. Yeah.
Cool. And I guess I'll just mention, those are some really great logistical stuff. And for anyone who's listening and might be like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. How do I kind of keep track of all this? One of the frameworks that I really love doing is to think about it in terms of like as you're planning things, to either if you have a teaching team, like you're actually going to be doing this with other people, or if you have like volunteers who are going to be helping you, or even if you are doing it alone, to find someone who can sort of be a listener and just sit down with you and take some time to actually just have a conversation with them about, what you want to do and, the experience that you want to create for people, and just sort of go through a list of all these different things and brainstorm together about, okay, how can we do this part really well? How can we do that part really well? And, just getting someone to kind of talk with you about what you're planning on doing can make a really huge difference, because it just gives you a sounding board for working through a lot of those things. And so one of the sort of first questions that I, always try to put out there is, what is it that you actually want to, before you start really planning things out, to take some time and just think about your goal. Well, what is it that you actually want to have happen? How will you know when you're successful? And just having a person there to sort of walk through it with you, it can be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, that's great. A sounding board, yeah. Oftentimes when we bounce things off somebody else, they hear things that one doesn't think of. And when we process it prior to doing it, we open ourselves up and the potential participants up to, wow, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I'm going to include that. Or, oh, you see a concern here. You see something I better think about. Yeah, thanks. That helps me a lot. So, yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, excellent. And so there's kind of this really interesting flow that, works really well when designing nature programs. And I kind of like to separate it all out into what happens before, during, and after your experiences outside. So before you actually do your day of activities, you do this meeting with your teaching team and kind of plan out the day. And then there's the experience that you have while you're actually out there doing the day. You're meeting the people, you're working with the kids, taking them through the activities. And then after the activities are done, you can come back together and talk about it and basically debrief your experience and pull out some of the lessons from doing that. And but I guess what I'm thinking is, Dave, what have been some of the your favorite topics? If you think about days when you have gone out and actually done stuff with people in nature, do you find that there tends to be like a focus of the day? Do you choose sort of an activity or a plan to like one topic to focus on?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question because it can kind of depend, if the group is seeking, are they seeking, something? So, hey, we need an aquatic experience for our Cub Scout, Boy Scout group. So now the client's coming to me with a ecological niche they want to explore. So that happens sometimes. Another thing that kind of happens for me is they select. They might have selected one of my programs because I've got 8 or 10 programs that I really enjoy. So I shoot that list to people. They select one based on what they're seeking. So that can be another way. Then I kind of know what I need to offer and where it's likely going to be. And then there's several that are just really very open-ended. I actually refer to them as like scavenger hunts, meaning let's go into a physical setting, whether it be relatively easy to access or whether it be a bit more remote. And remote, in my words, means you're in a deeper nature setting. You're not, traveling up a mountainside or anything quite that rigorous. And I cue them up. I'll cue them up for, okay, so for the next 10 minutes or so, let's try this, maybe auditory, or let's try this, olfactory, smell, or let's try, some kind of blend of sensual stimuli. Or let's look for some interesting things that might be here, like why don't we look under things? So that often leads to a cool invitation on the people's part. Oh, under? I got to move stuff to find stuff under, because lots of times people forget to move things, and when you move things, you see a whole nother level of the ecosystem. So so it'll depend. I'd like to bring it back to you because I think your bandwidth and your experience is richly different in some ways compared to mine. So let me turn it back to you. Given what I've said about some of my topics, what most comes up for you in terms of topics that you find that are really engaging, that your folks really love?
Yeah, I like to sort of pick a focus for the days when, if I'm going to be taking a group out, to have something to be able to say, this is what we're going to do this day, and it's like something exciting and specific so that they know what they're getting themselves into. So examples would be like, I recently did a wildlife tracking weekend, and you could do a day where you're going to focus on tracking, and all your activities and your stories and the exercises that you do are all going to be based on tracking. You could do a day just about bird language and learning about the birds, learning about how birds communicate, how their behavior works, and the different sort of messages that they send out. And those two different topics will attract different types of people. They'll resonate with different people a little bit differently. I also like to do stuff like ninja training, like nature ninja training or Jedi training. Those are often really good ways to engage kids and teens in awareness exercises without calling it awareness exercises, and you can get them out there and just really engaging with the landscape on a deep level by framing things in terms of, we're going to be ninjas, and that can be a cool thing. Another thing that I've seen work really well is like a wild food harvest. So if you're interested in doing a topic that's focusing more on plants and, edibles or medicinals, you can sort of start your day out by going out into the field and gathering a bunch of stuff up, basically moving through a landscape and just gathering everything that you can that's edible. And then, towards the end of the day, you all gather together and prepare it into this big feast. And it can be a really cool way to share plants and build knowledge of plants without just doing like an identification class, because that's not going to appeal to everybody. And I think more people are going to appeal to the idea of like, let's go find some food and eat it. And so that can be a good way to get people engaged. And so I think there's ways that you can build topics around any single interest that you might have. Things like an ecology adventure. I've done things where we'll just sort of do a wander through a big landscape and point out the differences between different types of ecology. Like, we'll stop at a hemlock forest and just notice how the forest is so dark and not very much grows on the forest floor, and it's like there's a particular type of forest there, and and that's the hemlock forest. But then we'll walk another 5 minutes and we'll be in like an oak forest, and it's this totally different experience. But people don't pay attention to that. So when you just start pointing it out, that can be a really eye-opening experience for folks. Just to do a wander and look at different ecology types. So these are just different ideas, and I guess the thing that I would offer our listeners is to just be thinking, what are the topics that really resonate with you? What are the topics that are exciting for you and that you would really be interested in sharing with your community, with your school, the classes that you're running, and just to be thinking about that as we move forward here. We'll get into a little bit more specifics about how to think about designing your flow through the day. But usually where your curiosity is, that's usually the best place to start.
So I think you've hit on something really pivotal. I do best, I'm sure you do best, and I'm sure our listeners will do best if you do exactly what you advised. Find some aspect of nature that you really love. It shows up that you love it. There's enthusiasm. There's emotion. There's some wisdom and knowledge around it. If you know you need a little more wisdom and knowledge, that's often not a problem. It'll be a blend of doing a little research and spending a little time prepping yourself to bring up your experience base. I know one of the things we did over the summer, my author team, we sat and for about 20 minutes we brainstormed what are all the kinds of fun things that we enjoy doing. And we came up with a list of programs. We ended up naming them and describing them, but in order to get the program name and description, our first question was, what do we love? What do we know something about? What do we sense people love? So that can really be a wonderful way to start. I don't want to go. I don't think the way to start is to say, I'm going to take people out and we're going to look for mushrooms. We're going to go mushroom hunting. Well, okay, if you're an expert on mushrooms and you get pretty excited about that and you've been out there and you do that, cool. But don't ever try to create something because you think it should be what you should do. Better to create something from some wisdom, passion, and love you have around some aspects of nature. And if there's a story you can tell while you're out there, that adds a really, really neat dimension to the immersion. You can make the story up. I often make stories up with younger people, children, and that is a blast to do. Or you can come there with a story that you've discovered from somebody who has something related to what you're doing. So I think, thank you, Brian, for hitting on something very crucial, the piece about go someplace that you love, go someplace, go meaning topic, do a topic, do something that you know and love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so these are kind of like conversations that are you can have with your team, the people who are working with you, or even just your support systems as you're thinking about getting ready. What are you really curious about? What are you excited to share? And that can be a really great way to kind of approach that. There's another thing that I wanted to share here, Dave, and it's just around this kind of the sort of how you actually, once you've sort of gotten together, you've brainstormed some of your ideas, you've gotten out, okay, here's what we want to do, here's the topic, you've got maybe some ideas about different activities that you can do. How do you actually start putting together the flow of the day? Like, where do you start?
Mm-hmm.
When people show up, what's the very first thing that you do when people show up for like a day-long event?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you're asking, I can tell you, or were you introducing what you like to do first? Well,
I guess I'm happy to go either way. I would love to hear if you do you have a consistent process that you follow as far as how do you start your programs? What do you do through the day, and then how you finish your programs?
Great. I have a template that seems to emerge more often, not always, but more often. So let me touch on that one. There's always the greeting. How will I greet them? What will I say? How will I look? Will I have someone with me that's assisting me or not? If so, what will they say? And we do a little rehearsal. We actually, if it's, and often I don't work alone. I work with at least one or two other partners. So we'll talk about introducing ourselves, and then we'll allow the other person to introduce themselves, and we'll talk a little bit about my work as an author, because I have a children's book that I've written, and often the children's book is a nice segue, so there may be a light immersion in a little bit of the book, if it's an appropriate opportunity. And if not, then once we have established the intro piece, we often get that sign-in sheet going around on a clipboard. So I never show up for an event without one or two clipboards with sign-up sheets on them, where the people can, sometime during the activity, they can find an opportunity to leave evidence of who they are. If they have a question, there's a column on it that allows them to address a question that they have. Those are really, really valuable for me, so I can maintain a connection to the participants. So that's kind of the early piece, rather than go through the whole logistical template. That's kind of the early component. Yes, I will then frame what we're going to do. I'll give them a light overview so they have expectations. So I've actually had one parent, when they realized we were going to be outside a lot, I don't think she was ready or dressed to be outside with her child very long. So they elected to quietly walk away, which is great. I want them to have a sense for what we're going to be doing so that they can gently assess, hey, is this right for me? Now I'm on site. We're going to be doing this, I would never want someone participating in something that they felt they didn't quite read the fine print. They didn't quite remember that it was, all weather will be, please come dressed for any kind of weather. And they need to have an opportunity to gently, kind of step back. So let me stop there and turn it back to you and then maybe ask you on the front end, in those early moments, how do you set the stage? What do you lay out? How do you greet and meet and greet people when they're coming?
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of narrow in on one sort of thing that you were alluding to in your description there, and that's
okay.
that part of what your introduction does, the sort of the starting point, is you actually share your story. You share a story, and it's I think that's really significant. A lot of times people will focus on the activities and sort of the actual being outside in nature part of it. And I think there's real magic that happens when even before you go out and actually explore the landscape, just to gather everyone in a circle and go around and hear everybody's name, get everyone's voice heard, and just share a story. Like today we're going to be talking about bird language, and and so share a story of a really cool time when you went out and you were listening to some robins in the yard, and the chickens in the backyard were going insane, and I looked out my window and there was a bobcat there, and share some sort of bird language story that just kind of sets the stage and teaches without actually being really direct about teaching. So you're starting to introduce the topic and sharing something that's really interesting, but it's not. It's through a conversation, and it's through sitting together as a group of people and listening to each other. And so, yeah, that's always sort of how I officially would start.
Okay.
A thing is by gathering as a group, and I'll sort of introduce the topic, share a story. And then I'll start to give a little mission, like where whatever your next activity is going to be, we're going to go out and we're going to do a bird sit. We're going to go into this field and we're going to sit and listen to birds and just notice what their behavior is doing, and so sort of introducing the activity that we're going to do, and sort of just leads very, very nicely into in the next step, actually going to do it. And so, yeah, I'll pass it back to you and see what kind of thoughts are percolating there.
So once the early pieces have been laid out, and I'm beginning now to pick up the pace and kind of get really into the meat and substance of it, for me, the tactile, kinesthetic, sensual piece needs to kick in. I would not want to continue to rely on talking to people. I would want me to begin to get quiet and them begin to get into a synergistic activity with nature, and in the ideal world, with another person. So they can either engage in the next phase of the activity alone, or, and I often invite this, I often encourage this part, do this next component, given the directions I offer, the invitations I give, with a buddy, with a partner. Grab a friend, and hang out together. You're going to have two sets of ears and eyes, and you're going to be able to express wonder together. Sometimes if it's a younger child, it might be a parent that turns out to be their buddy, but I'll even invite two parents to gather up two children and head off and then do a search based on what I'm inviting them to search and explore together. And so there's that component of the activity. Go off and immerse yourself in some aspect of what we're doing, and it'll be relatively directed, but often open-ended, because in my work, it's creative nature play. So it's kind of fascinating that we have some different skill sets here, yours and mine. So what I imagine, and you're going to elaborate on this, you might be saying, look for, animal tracks that look kind of like this. Let's see if anybody can find either a track like this or tracks just in general. So in my world, we would call that spotlight consciousness. You're looking for a significant item of detail. With younger kids, you often go in with a different lens, because they arrive with a different lens. They come in with the lens of lantern consciousness. So it's something where, what do you smell when what do you see? I'm going to give you a little container. Gather some cool things that attract you. And that may be about as specific as I say. Here's a little container. You got 10 minutes. Come back with something that was really cool, or a collection of things that you found interesting. And then we'll lay a blanket out, and everyone will dump their stuff on. And that is really a cool moment. That's a very cool moment, when everyone starts dumping their stuff on, and we start taking pictures of it, and the kids get a chance to go around and talk about what they found. And that all occurred through a broad invitation. Seek this ecosystem, hang out here, and bring something that attracted you. So, yeah. Now, I'm sure I'll give it back to you, Brian, and talk to the listeners about, what your experience is, because my sense is it probably is a little bit more focused on a particular type of creature. And let me give it back to you.
Yeah, sometimes it definitely. There are times when I like to do things that are really focused and specific and like really linked to a topic, and then there are other times when I like to do more of let's just wander and see what calls to us and go explore that. Typically, the way I'll do it is like, say I'm doing like a tracking day. I might start out by doing something more focused. So after I've sort of told my story and we're getting out there, we're exploring like a sandbar or something, and we come across a set of tracks. We will actually get everyone to circle around the tracks and look at them and just spend some really good time either journaling or, doing measurements, and we'll ask questions about the track, like, who is this? What is it doing here? Can you tell from looking at the trail. Was it walking? Was it trotting? Was it galloping? How was this animal moving? What kind of animal was this? Was it a male? Was it a female? Is it alone? Is it moving with others? What time of day was it here? And we'll look at it from all these different angles, and that's a very focused activity where we're really directly and pretty intentionally guiding the process of opening awareness around a single track and or a single trail. And so that's the sort of thing that I really want to get some of that really good focus time in, because it's really fun to do that, and it's a really good brain exercise to just use your detective skills and look at signs like that. But then as the day goes on, I might start to switch things up, because you start to notice that people are getting the focus starts to wane after a little while, and it starts to become a little bit more like, I can't look at these tracks anymore. I need to sort of do something else. And so at that point, I would probably take more of an approach of like, just what are you curious about now? And, let's go take a wander and just, think about the animals in this landscape and just move wherever our curiosity brings us. So if you feel curious about an area, you just go over and investigate. So it's a much more unstructured activity where basically the minimum requirement is just to move around and check stuff out that call to you. And sometimes it ends up just being lying on the edge of a riverbank and feeling the sun on your skin, and that's totally fine too, because I just think the balance is really good. Having that balance, moving from the really focused activities and then tracking the energy of the group. And as they start to, sort of wane, you can move into more unstructured exploration type wandering activities.
I think you said something really important and valuable. Pay attention to your participants' affect. Is the level of engagement leveling off? Are more of them, most of them, still showing curiosity? To the degree we as the guide, we as the mentor, are adaptable, then we're more likely to ensure a fun, engaging activity for our participants. And, I think it would be an unwise choice to think you have to go out there for this amount of time. Yes, okay, have a goal in mind about how much time you're going to be out there, but always be ready to problem solve on the spot, because something really unique may come up. Somebody may find something that's really cool, and then you gather around that, and you just let the program unexpectedly go there because a really cool find was made. But I never got this done. A tape could play in the background, right? I never got this done. I was really thinking we were going to go over here. Okay, well, maybe save that for another trip with another group, because this group found something very cool that I didn't expect, and this may not happen again. So that spontaneity and adaptability to occasionally let your agenda go a little bit, especially in times of a really unique episode. Obviously, if weather is presenting itself in a really remarkable way, that too can serve as a way to tweak what you thought you were going to do, but the weather's really unusually beautiful or the weather's really unusually yucky. Be adaptable so that you can maximize the learning given those circumstances. So would we be ready to kind of shift to the latter stages of the activity, the like gathering again, or the after piece, and if so, where do you like to go? What would it be like to be with you, Brian, when you're in that after stage?
Right. So I'll just point out the overall structure that we're following again. There's the experience that you have with the group here in the circle, sharing stories, talking about the topic and what you're going to be doing before you actually have the outdoor experience. Then you're going to actually go out and, into the field, do your focused activities first, and then leading into more of the relaxed wandering activities. But then after you have those experiences, what I like to do is, once again, gather everybody up in a circle again, and actually give a chance for everyone to share, what did you learn today? What did you observe? What were some of your favorite moments? What were some of the experiences you had that you just thought were really cool? And giving people a chance to actually review their experiences and reflect in a little bit of a deeper way, and to hear about other people's observations, because, especially if you have a large group where maybe some people went off in one direction and other people went off in another direction, there's going to be different experiences, and not everyone gets to experience everything that the whole group did. And so it just gives you a chance to actually share the knowledge as a community, and community learning, it just helps everyone grow their awareness so much faster than if everyone's just having their own isolated experience. And so I like to kind of just do that and sort of harvest the stories, and you can even plant some little seeds for possible in the future, like what you're going to do next time, or other follow-up activities that they could do over the coming days and weeks that would help to solidify the learnings of the day. Yeah. And that's what I like to do.
Hearing you talk, I remember a program we did this summer where the core of the movement was just to gather a whole bunch of things that are in nature, not so much objects that would be remarkably stable, like not so much rocks and highly dense objects. The invitation was to go out and find some things. It was kind of a modified scavenger hunt, and they had their little containers, and then they came back and they shared that, and then I said, hey, I'm looking at these objects, and I'm seeing that many of these objects, nature turns into something else. So we talked a little bit about, this would turn into that, and this would turn into that, and this would turn into that. And then we got to this topic of soil. We talked about how is soil formed. And I said, hey, I've got something really exciting. Go off for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a bag. And go take a partner with you and collect all the plant material you can. And we talked a little bit about what poison ivy and poison oak looked like and stuff like that. And then I said, I'm going to howl like a wolf when the time is up. So here the mentor, Dave Bauer, is acting a little bit crazy, but they loved it. So they went out for 10 minutes, collected a whole bunch of leaf litter and plant matter, and then by the time they arrived back, I had a big tarp laying on the ground, and I had pulled out of my vehicle some compost that I had at home, and I had one of my assistants with their handheld shears, shredders, right? So they could cut up all the stuff into small pieces. What I knew I was going to be trying to do in that lesson, one of the things I was going to do, they were going to walk out with a small sample of starter mulch for a compost bin. And one of the things we did on the back end of the activity is we invited the kids and the parents how many of you would love to follow up and take this material that you're taking home and start your own compost pile? Or maybe, how many of you have a compost pile and you could put this in? So that was kind of cool because it led to, well, they didn't have to start it themselves without being shown what it looked like. They didn't know they were doing it, but they were actually collecting plant material that naturally shows up in a yard if you own property. And what would it be like what would you do to it? Well, you kind of chop it up into smaller pieces if you can. And then we introduced some organic stuff. Dave showed up with his finished compost. What was in it? Live worms and bugs and a lot of humus and stuff like that. So everybody got to physically mix finished compost with the green stuff and the brown stuff that they had collected, and they walked home with a small collection with the hope that some of them might actually start their own working compost pile. So in some cases, it can be a segue to them engaging in something neat and ongoing in the world they live in. So that's kind of the back end of some of the opportunities that I have with some of the kids and families that I work with. How about for you? Is there more there on the back end of it, or I mean, is there anything more you like to do before they kind of leave you, Brian?
Yeah, well, I think one of my goals is always to focus on routines and helping people to establish their own personal routines. And so for me, a lot of like the actual time that we spend in the field, that's not necessarily where all the greatest work happens. And it's sort of an opportunity for us to introduce routines, introduce different ways of looking at the world, different types of attitudes, and ways of approaching nature. But then the real magic and what I really want to inspire for people is that they go home and actually start doing a sit spot, start doing some sort of daily or at the very least ongoing routine where you're getting outside, you're tuning in with nature, using your senses, having an experience, and then reflecting on that experience on a deeper level around what are you learning through that experience? What is that actually teaching you to be out there? And over a period of weeks, months, years, people who really do embody routines of nature connection, and they're not just having like a one-time experience and then it's done. They get tremendous changes in their life that just support them into being such a more a person who's more living their path. They're they have all the benefits of nature that we've talked about in other episodes of this podcast. The mental clarity and the creativity and the desire to give back to the world. That those things will start to emerge, and so that's sort of things that I have in the back of my mind. That there's a really big picture beyond just this one day of nature activities, but that it kind of sets the stage for helping people to increase their motivation and their inspiration and having some practical ways to move forward.
So one of the things I want to include as we wrap up today is, so if you're listening and, your expertise isn't program manager, you're not a Brian Mertens, maybe you're not a Dave Bauer who designs programs for groups and stuff. Well, a mom, a dad, a babysitter, an aunt and uncle, a grandma, a grandpa. You have somebody in your life that you want to go out in nature with, or you want to go out alone. Just go places, be curious, and just macro qualities. Be comfortable, be safe, have the right clothing for the physical setting you're going into. But be sure you're telling people that you're heading out. Be sure you let somebody know you're back, especially if you're going to go deeper into the woods, which may not happen for too many of you. Will you need a map or not? Just some of those kind of basic in-woods things that you might forget. Don't create something that's going to leave you uncomfortable and leave you kind of vulnerable. Work within your level of expertise. Work within your level of capacity. And whether you're taking others out or not, or maybe you're just taking a friend out, or maybe you're just going out yourself and you're trying to design a program for yourself, a day out in the woods. We hope, Brian and I hope that some of what we've said today assists you too, because there's lots of neat ways to have a really wonderful experience and then pause a tiny bit before you jump into it so that you can maximize, your enjoyment.
Yeah. It occurs to me that this is another one of those kind of big topics that there's a lot of different directions that people might be thinking about when they listen to this, and so we would love to just hear from you about how are you thinking about planning a day of nature activities? What context are you going to be using this in? And, we'd love to know a little bit more of the specifics of what kind of things you're excited in working on, because, maybe there are future topics that could come out of it that would be a little bit more specific. And it would be fun to just keep driving this topic, because I think it's a really important part of actually helping us as leaders to create experiences in nature that are going to actually really serve the people that show up for our programs. Or, as Dave was just mentioning, if you're a grandparent and, just being able to help your grandkids in a much deeper way. And so that's all good stuff, and we could definitely go a lot deeper into this topic if folks have questions or comments or anything that they want to go deeper with. So, I'll just throw that out there.
All right, so I think we're in a good space, and I think we've covered a generous amount of novel information, and look forward to our next chat reasonably soon. And please do reach back to us in whatever way works. There is that Facebook page that you can go to, the Rewilding Conversations on Facebook, where you're going to see the great majority of the podcasts listed there and opportunities to connect. And I know on my Nature Play, Creative Nature Play website, you can talk to me there. And Brian, if they wanted to talk to you specifically, can you remind them of where they would find you and be able to do that?
Yeah, you can go to naturementor.com, and there's
Great.
Lots of different ways to contact me there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're good.
Awesome.